Battlefront's next new release is for TeamYankee, with Nordic Forces. This release wave adds 3 Scandinavian countries, as well as Finland, to TeamYankee's roster of nations. Many of these Nordic countries have unique equipment, so there's bound to be some interesting new models to look forward to. I apologise in advance for any dreadful mispronunciation of any names in this review. I'm used to annoying Germans or Russians, but it's not often you get to annoy 4 nationalities all at once. I'm so sorry. With that said, join me for a look at what's coming. Nordic Forces is the next TeamYankee release wave, due out in late July 2023. Battlefront were kind enough to send me a PDF of the upcoming book, so let's see what we have in store for us. Nordic Forces adds 4 nations to the game: Finland, Sweden, Norway and Denmark. I already know at least one local player who's been fielding a Swedish TeamYankee force for years, so I'm guessing he's looking forward to official stats and force diagrams for them. I don't have a detailed release schedule to work from at this point, but I'm going to make some assumptions about the first wave. If Battlefront follow their usual pattern, they'll release an army starter box set, unit card packs, and the source book. Let's start with the book. Nordic Forces is a hardback 120-page book that covers all the nations in the release, all in the one place. We'll talk about that in detail in a minute. The box set will be a bit tricky with 4 nations, but I think I know what's coming. The release is a Swedish box set, the Swedish S-Tank Company starter box. This box set has 8 S-Tanks, Sweden's unique indigenous turretless tank design. This is a new plastic kit. I've shown a preview of an assembled Battlefront S-Tank in a previous video, but I'm looking forward to getting my hands on this one to get a closer look. I believe you can build the original Stridsvagn 103 version, as well as the upgraded Stridsvagn 103C. But don't quote me on that. There are also 3 open-topped Volvo C303 off-road utility vehicles, shown on the box mounting the TOW anti-tank missile. This model can also mount a firing post for the Swedish RBS-56 Bill ATGM, or, if you're old school like me, a Bofors 90mm recoilless rifle. I'm not sure all of these versions are included in the box, but I'm guessing they might be. The starter box also has 2 HKP-9 helicopters. These are TOW missile-armed variants of the German BO-105 helicopter. Each chopper mounts 4 BGM-71C improved TOW anti-tank guided missiles. The S-Tank Company box is the only starter set I know is coming out for Nordic Forces. All the other nations are just available in platoon boxes, as far as I know. The Restless Kaiser from Modelling for Advantage mentioned on our recent live stream that the Swedish starter box is a limited run option. It won't be a regularly stocked Battlefront product, so if you want one, you should pre-order one now to make sure you don't miss out. The other usual product for a first wave are the unit card packs. Each of the 4 nations covered have a unit card pack. Finnish forces have 26 unit cards plus 7 Swedish Allied support cards. The Swedish pack has 18 Swedish unit cards plus 8 Finnish support cards. Norway has 16 unit cards and 11 Allied support cards, while Denmark has 16 unit cards and 18 Allied support cards. So that's what I'm expecting in the first Nordic Forces release wave. The Swedish starter box, 4 national unit card packs, plus the Nordic Forces sourcebook. Normally I'd go through the later release waves as well, but Battlefront haven't opened the pre-order page yet, so I can't. Let's look at the book instead. As I said, it's a 120-page, full-colour hardback book. It's the usual mix of TeamYankee timeline information for the fictional conflict, national formations, unit stats, painting guides, and product catalogue. All very pretty and well produced. If we check out the contents page, you can see there's Finnish, Swedish, Norwegian, and Danish sections. Each section is self-contained, including a national force diagram, individual tank and mechanised company lists, and unit stats and details. There's also special rules appropriate for each Nordic nation, plus a painting guide. Each of the nations here have unique camouflage patterns, and there are detailed paint callouts for Vallejo colours. A catalogue section at the end of each nation shows what Battlefront products you need to buy to field the units. These are a mix of existing platoon boxes for things like Leopard 1, but also new units specific to these northern nations. I never spend much time on the briefing materials, but the book outlines the northern battle, with invasions and landings throughout Scandinavia. There's maps with arrows and phase lines for those who like that sort of thing. The first nation we come to is Finland. In this scenario, the Soviets force a passage through Finnish Lapland to invade Sweden and Norway. Here's the force diagram for the Finns. There are 5 formation options, 3 armoured and 2 mechanised infantry. Tanks are Soviet-designed T-72 and T-55s, with slight national variations. The T-72 FM2 has ERA armour, similar to the T-72B, while the T-72 FM1 is a vanilla T-72 with bazooka skirts instead of BDD. Tank companies are organised on Western lines, with a HQ and up to 3 platoons of 3 tanks. Companies have an optional infantry platoon, as well as integrated artillery and AA options. Troops are generally well trained and motivated. Finland has some support options for more artillery, AA, recon, and specialist anti-tank support, plus they can call on some Swedish support as well. They also have the usual option for an allied formation. Apart from slightly tweaked tanks, the most unusual unit is the T-55 Marksman AA platoon. This is an anti-aircraft gun system using the British-designed Marksman turret mounted on a Polish T-55 chassis. Marksman is armed with twin 35mm autocannons and features a Marconi radar for target tracking. In reality, Finland is the only country to actually adopt this system, fielding 7 in all. However, the game expands Marksman to British forces as well. Finnish mechanised infantry companies also get access to the 95 S5861 anti-tank platoon. This platoon has 3 gun teams equipped with 95mm recoilless rifles mounted on a wheeled carriage. Each gun team has a BTR-60 APC transport. You also have the option to add up to 2 Apillas teams. Apillas is a French short-range, one-shot anti-tank rocket that can give this anti-tank platoon more punch. These are available in the Finnish heavy weapons blister, along with a pair of SA-7 Grail AA missile teams and 4 ITO ATGM teams. Next up is Sweden. Sweden was a neutral nation during the Cold War, but was pro-Western and a likely Soviet target in the event of hostilities. Here's the Swedish forces diagram. There are only 3 formations here, 2 tank and 1 infantry. Tank companies are either S-Tank or the older Centurion. Both of these tanks will be new plastic kits, and both are much anticipated releases. The infantry companies are armoured rifle companies, mounted in PBV 302 armoured personnel carriers. The PBV carrier is a Swedish design with wide tracks for good cross-country mobility and armed with a 20mm autocannon. A glance at the support section indicates there are plenty of other unique weapon systems in the Swedish inventory. These include the bandkanon artillery battery, the IKV-91 tracked anti-tank platoon, and a number of AA and AT systems mounted in APCs. Air support is the RKP-9 helicopter and the AJ-37 Viggen fighter bomber. Based on the chassis of the S-tank, bandkanon is a self-propelled 155mm howitzer. The gun has a high rate of fire thanks to the autoloader system with two 7-round magazines. This is reflected in the game with the autoloader rule, which improves the chance to hit units under the template. The IKV-91 is a unique vehicle. It looks like a tank, but it's actually an assault gun mounted on a chassis derived from the PBV APC. The gun is a 9cm weapon with decent performance for its calibre, but the IKV-91 has limited armour. These were generally issued to infantry and mechanised brigades. The IKV-91s are an organic option for the Armoured Rifle Company, where you can take a platoon of 3. I'm guessing this is a resin and metal kit. You can see here from the catalogue it comes in a box of 3. But the new S-tank is definitely plastic. It says all plastic right here on the catalogue. The Stridsvagn 103 tank platoon box contains 3 tanks. That might seem an odd number, but if you look at the S-tank company diagram, the HQ has 2 to 3 tanks and up to 3 3-tank platoons. I guess they are also 3 tank support platoons as allies or attachments, so 3 tanks in a box is probably more flexible. If you're not familiar with the S-tank, it's a unique design that mounts the 105mm main gun rigidly on the chassis, with gun laying elevation achieved by a hydropneumatic suspension. The rigid hull mounting means a conventional turret isn't required, and the fixed gun lends itself to using an autoloader. Crew is 3 men, and includes a rear-facing driving position. S-tank is pretty unique, and there are special rules like ambush tank and slat armour to reflect this, but the overworked rule also highlights some of the challenges with the design. Armour is modest over the front, so hiding and shooting from cover will be required for survivability. But the long 105mm gun has better penetration than the standard L7 gun, giving it a chance against modern tanks. The other plastic tank kit I'm really excited for here is the Centurion. The Stridsvagn 104 is an upgraded and modernised Centurion with a 105mm gun. Sweden had been using Centurion since 1953. I don't want to go into too much detail, but the slightly thicker armour than the S-tank is offset by lower armour penetration, but it is a cheaper option. Again, a look at the company diagram shows a HQ and up to 3 3-tank platoons, plus supporting infantry and recon. This makes Centurion a viable and cheaper, but slower and less capable alternative to the S-tank. I don't want to cover this in too much depth, but I thought it would be interesting to see the unique units in the Swedish catalogue. We've talked about bandkanon. This will come in a 3-vehicle battery box set. Presumably this is a resin and metal kit, and it looks like it will be pretty big. Then there's the anti-tank platoon. This box set has 4 vehicles, plus a choice of the 90mm recoilless rifle, TOW or Bill anti-tank guided missiles. These open-topped vehicles were fast, so fast that the troops often rolled them over. The tubes you can see on the side of the vehicles are apparently fold-down roll cages. Next comes the Swedish infantry. The armoured rifle platoon comes with a HQ, 3 MG teams, and 3 M48 Carl Gustaf anti-tank teams. There's also a Bill ATGM team. The MG teams get options for either the M68 or the later M86 one-shot anti-tank weapons for close-in defence. And their transport is the PBV 302 transport. This is the standard transport variant. Each box contains 4 resin and metal vehicles. These can be used as transports or as the recon variant. They're all armed with a 20mm cannon, plus the box has 1 additional turret to make an artillery observer vehicle. The next box set has tracked weapons carriers. The chassis is based on an older self-propelled gun chassis. Note these carriers have large roof hatches on the forward deck, allowing the weapon teams to fire from the vehicle. This box set can make the anti-tank vehicle with single-tube tow launchers, or the anti-air variant mounting the RBS-70 SAM. Both are on pedestal mounts. Norway is the next nation in the book. In the TeamYankee narrative, Soviet forces cross into Norway's northern tip. Norway's force diagram is limited to the Brigade Nord, deployed in that area. The Norwegian force diagram has only two formations, one armoured and one infantry. Brigade Nord has up to 2 Leopard 1 tank squadrons and up to 3 M113 storm squadrons. The support choices are a mixture of Norwegian units like the Feldvågen recon and anti-tank variants and the NM195 anti-aircraft batteries, plus a mix of Swedish and US Marine support. NATO doctrine of the time earmarked mobile British, Canadian and US Marine units to reinforce Norway in the event of war. Battlefront have chosen to give Norway the US Marines as their main support option to reflect this. For example, your aircraft choices are either AJ-37 Viggens from Sweden or the AV-8 Harriers of the Marines. Other support choices are M60 Patton tanks, Marine rifle platoons in amphibious transports, M109 howitzers, Humvee with SAMs, and even some Cobra or Apache attack helicopters. This mix could give Norwegian lists some interesting variation. The Leopard 1 tank squadron has a HQ and up to 3 tank platoons. Platoons are 3 or 4 tanks. Organic options include an M113 Storm platoon of infantry, as well as an NM142 anti-tank troop and an M106 mortar platoon. That makes for a pretty well-rounded combined arms force. The drawback is that Leopard 1 has very thin armour and lacks sufficient penetration to deal with later generation Soviet armour. The M113 Storm Squadron is the infantry list. There's a HQ and up to 3 mechanised infantry platoons. These can be mounted in M113s or upgraded to the NM135, an upgrade of the M113 that adds a 20mm gun turret. This gave the infantry a boost in firepower over the standard M113 APC. The formation has a couple of anti-tank options, with the NM142 anti-tank platoon firing tow missiles, plus a Leopard 1 tank troop. The only other organic choice is self-propelled mortars, either the 81mm M125 or the 107mm M106. Again, I want to check out the Norwegian-specific units in the catalogue. Obviously, M109s, Leopard 1s and other existing units can be fielded from West German or US box sets. I'm talking about units like the Feldvågen Recon Troop. Feldvågen is a field car, a Mercedes 240 GD off-roader used in a number of variants. These will be resin and metal, and the box contains 5 vehicles. Armament is 4 7.62mm machine guns, 2 M250 caliber machine guns, and up to 4 tow launchers on pedestal mounts. You can mix and match these to build the Feldvågen units you need. The NM142 anti-tank troop has 4 vehicles. NM142 features a turret with a 2-tube tow missile launcher. Missiles can be either the I-TOW or the harder-hitting TOW-2. TOW-2 has a bigger warhead and will give the Norwegians an option to take on heavy armour targets. I'm guessing the box set will be 4 plastic M113 kits plus the parts for the tow launcher turret. The M113 Stormtroop infantry box works for both Norway and Denmark. The figures are based a bit differently between the nations, so consult the included instructions in the book or check the TeamYankee website. The Norwegian Stormtroop has a HQ stand and 4 MG3 infantry teams with M72 law. Then there are 3 anti-tank teams mounted on small bases. These can either be armed with Carl Gustav recoilless guns or optionally upgraded with Eric's missiles. The figures for both are here. Their transports are a box of 4 M113s. These cover the standard M113 plus the parts for the NM135 upgrade, which adds a turret, 20mm cannon and external fuel tanks. Anti-air is included, enabling you to build the NM195 Samtrax as well. This mounts the RBS-70 missile firing post on a pedestal mount in the open passenger hatch. Again, I'm expecting these add-on Norwegian parts to the base M113 plastic kit will be resonant metal. This brings us to Denmark. The narrative has the Soviets advancing into Denmark, breaking through Danish forces in Schleswig-Holstein and advancing towards Jutland. The Danes are supported by the West Germans from the west and a US Marine Division amphibious landing force in the north. Here's the Danish formations diagram. There are 3 formations, 2 armoured and 1 mechanised infantry. Your armoured choices are either Leopard 1 or Centurion DK tank squadrons, up to 3 of each. Infantry formations are up to 4 companies of mechanised infantry and armoured personnel carriers. Support choices are SP artillery, an observer, aircraft and a SAM group using red-eye missiles. There's also a pair of scout groups mounted in wheeled utility vehicles. The really interesting option here is the Centurion Tank Hunter platoon. This utilises unmodernised Centurions, still armed with the earlier 20-pounder gun as a mobile anti-tank force. These get the accurate special rule that eliminates the to-hit penalty for range if they fire stationary. This makes them great to use from ambush. The Allied support options for the Danes are West German. You get armoured infantry, rocket artillery, attack helicopters and AA assets, as well as access to Leopard 1 and 2 tanks if you want them. A Leopard 2 can give you a nice edge. The Leopard 1 tank squadron gives you a HQ and up to 3 tank platoons. Each platoon has 3 tanks. Organic options include some mechanised infantry and APCs, as well as a TOW anti-tank platoon. There's also mortars and SP tube artillery. The Centurion DK squadron has the same structure, just with the slightly better armoured but older tanks. However, the Leopards get the edge in sights with thermal imaging. Combine that with the Leopard's higher speed off-road, Centurion ends up slightly cheaper overall. The Centurion DKs at this point in history have just completed an upgrade program. These were all armed with the 105mm gun, with a laser rangefinder and an early thermal imaging system called a thermal tracker. The Armoured Infantry Company formation has a similar structure to the tank squadrons. There's a HQ and up to 3 platoons of infantry mounted in M113 APCs. There's also an option for a platoon of M125 81mm SP mortars. Organic anti-tank for the formation is provided by a platoon of either Leopard or Centurion tanks, and an M113 tow-armed ATGM platoon. Artillery includes more SP mortars, this time heavier 120mm mortar-armed M113s and a battery of M109 SP guns. Eyes and ears for the Danes are the scout groups. These are groups of 4 Mercedes 240 utility vehicles used in the light reconnaissance role. These are armed with machine guns, with some M72 laws for close-in tank defence. These are what Danish forces will be looking at to seek out the enemy and push out their deployment zones on the table. I mentioned the Danish infantry are based a little differently to the Norwegian troops, despite using the same figure box set. The painting guide for Denmark also has this helpful basing guide, showing how your infantry teams should be based. The big difference is the Danish Carl Gustaf teams, mounted on a medium base rather than small bases used for the Norwegians. This also shows the Danish Red-Eye SAM teams mounted on a large base. The book rounds out with some scenarios. These are always an interesting addition, one I think doesn't get enough attention. The 3 missions here are on the frontier, hold the flank, and mountain pass. Each scenario has suggested forces, but offers alternatives as well. One interesting feature of these missions is the Fog of War special scenario rules. This gives the defender tokens they place during deployment instead of their actual units. Some tokens represent units, while others are dummies. The tokens only get revealed to be units or not when the enemy gets within 24 inches with line of sight. 100% intelligence is a drawback of miniatures games, so I'd be really keen to see a game played with these rules. That extra bit of uncertainty about the location of the defender's forces might significantly change how the game plays out. Anyway, that's a quick overview of the Nordic Forces book. Detail here is necessarily limited, but I've tried to cover the release in broad strokes. Again, I would normally focus on the release schedule and the new units, but the pre-order list isn't on the TeamYankee website yet. Hopefully I've given you enough of a taster here to whet your appetite. Having the 4 nations here makes this a big release. Necessarily there will be fewer players who want to play these than say the US or Soviets, but I know many players who are eager to have official lists and units for nations like the Swedes. And there's some great new units coming. I have no interest in a Swedish list, but I'm going to have to build some S-tanks, just because they're so unique. And I've been waiting for centurions in plastic for years. I haven't seen a sprue yet, but the rumour is this kit can build a multitude of centurion variants. I'll be hard-pressed to limit myself to just one box. Plus I want some RBS-70 gunners for my Australians. RBS-70 was adopted in the ADF in 1987, replacing Red Eye for air defence. I'm sure I can sneak some in somewhere without anyone noticing. But there's also a wealth of other unique systems used by these nations that are coming out, whether that's scout jeeps, missile turrets for APCs, the IKV-91 assault gun, or even the AJ-37 Viggen fighter bomber. What are you most excited for? What nation are you planning on fielding? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching. See you next time.